Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Community Foundation's Let's Talk on Childcare. My name is George Ferrari, and I serve as CEO of your Community Foundation. Let's Talks are a series of conversations with leaders in various sectors within the mission-driven world. We've been doing these for quite a while now. All of our information is archived on our website as well. We've talked about housing, we've talked about youth and communities, we've talked about workers, all sorts of information. And today we are very excited to have with us Sue Dale Hall, the 30-year CEO of the Child Development Council, who is retiring very soon, remaining in the community, staying active, I'm sure. And thank you, Sue, for taking time to be with us and open up for presentation. And once your presentation is done, we have a chance to ask questions as well. You can put those in the chat box or ask them directly. So Sue, I'll turn it right over to you. Thank you for making time as you're cleaning out your office this week and getting ready to go on the next exciting phase of your life.
Thank you, George. I have 7 days left. And as many of you probably heard, Melissa Perry will be the new CEO of the Child Development Council, and she comes from within as the Family Services Director. So I feel very confident in our ability to keep a real positive momentum going into the future and handling all the changes we've been seeing. As I get started, I think I looked at different names. I know many of you out there, but I just want to let you know that the Child Development Council's role is really to support the whole childcare community, from parents' needs to providers' needs, providers of all different types, both regulated and non-regulated, and to the general community, including the business community's needs. And so you can imagine the last year has been quite challenging for everyone. I have to really give a shout out to our community here in Tompkins County that stepped up in a grand way. The Community Foundation, United Way, the other foundations locally, everyone really stepped in and helped. And the resiliency of our childcare community really depended upon that and benefited from that. So they get a lot of credit too for dealing with all the changes that we've seen. I don't want to go backwards and look completely at 2020, but I'm going to try to point out a few things. And it might feel a little bit all over the board, but I'm going to try to do it in a smooth way as possible, looking at what trends we're seeing and how does that move us forward. So when I talk about childcare, I'll be looking at children in the preschool childcare settings in home-based care centers. Those are children 6 weeks to 5 years old, and school-age childcare. So I may use the term SAC programs, which is typically 6 to 12-year-olds, and that's the maximum age through age 12, which children can be in what New York State defines as childcare. It also sometimes includes 4-year-olds. And I saw in one of the questions leading into this that people wanted to know where our gaps are. And after school care for 4-year-olds who are in the universal pre-K programs in the school district are one of the groups that there's a big gap for. Infants and toddlers and other areas. I'm not going to go into great detail. I'd be happy to answer some questions on that as we move along. But really what we saw happen in 2020 was we started out with a scarcity model. We didn't have enough childcare already, so only enough care for 1 out of 3 children. In New York State, that we are designated as one of the childcare deserts. And that's not true across all of New York State. Some people think that it is, but it's definitely true in Tompkins County. Our biggest fear and our biggest success was, our biggest fear was that we would lose our childcare if they closed, that they would not reopen during the pandemic. And we're very fortunate that we're now at just a little bit of a net gain at the end of the year. We had a 4% net gain in actual licensed capacity or ability to serve kids. So that really speaks to that resiliency of our community. But still, we're returning to this sort of deficit place of not having enough. Our capacity, our utilization under, the next slide is fine, Amy, is our capacity is really maxed out. When you call around, you find out that there's a waiting list everywhere. I want to remind people that children come and go throughout childcare in a little bit different pattern than they do in school age care and in school. So you'll see that there are periodic openings. And some of this has been really shown true during the pandemic. We've had sudden room closures and then people don't return to care. We've had a lot of work-related issues that have come up for families. And we know that not everybody could be served. I think one of the things as we're looking forward is that we're going to really see an increase, and we have already started to see an increase, particularly for school-age kids, but also for the real young ones, for part-time requests. And what that means is that there's, people, if they're working hybrid, they may say, oh, I'm going to try and keep my kids home if my employer will allow me to do childcare and work at the same time. There are some major employers that are saying no to that. But they're trying to do a combination of work at home and in on-site off work. And this doesn't really work very well for childcare. There aren't as many part-time spaces. If you need care 1 day a week, that leaves 4 open spaces. So they try to fill that with some other part-timers, and it leaves gaps in their program, which means gaps in their budget. One of the real positive things that came out of the last year that I hope will benefit the year coming forward is that as spacing requirements, group sizes suddenly change from time to time we are now in a high incidence area for COVID and Delta variant spread, means often smaller group sizes. And we were able last year with the community support, able to help open up outdoor classrooms, which is good for kids anytime, not just because of the pandemic. So that was one of the real shining stars, I think, that came out of the last year. So as we look at what families need and how we move forward, you can go ahead and shift to the next slide. It's really important. Oh, that's not showing up the whole thing on mine, but it's really important to realize that families are still suffering, that many people are not back to work. They lost hours or they lost their jobs completely. They're looking for work. They're having difficulty finding work or finding work that matches their skills or match their childcare setting. And because of all the variations in what's happening structurally in childcare as a result of COVID, there's a lot of toxic stress. And with children and with families and adults, parents and children mirror the stress that they find. So if children are feeling stress in childcare, they'll take it home, and parents will feel that stress. And vice versa, if parents are feeling stress at home, the children will feel that and they'll mirror it and take it to childcare. So we're seeing that happen a lot. And what I don't want people to forget is that the childcare providers themselves are feeling this same kind of stress, that they're managing really sort of unusual circumstances, kids who don't have a routine, who might be feeling the stresses of the economic insecurity at home, or just any kind of sudden change really can have an impact on the children. So that's something we really have to look for going forward. And when the school district asked me what do we expect from kids moving from childcare into school, we're going to expect that transition to be more difficult for the kindergartners and the young ones going into the school and on site, just like it is difficult for kids who have been in school and now are going back after a year away. So we're really sort of anticipating that there will be quite a significant time to try to find our equilibrium again for kids in schools and how that operates. We're also seeing a trend that happens in the community overall, that there's a workforce shortage, and this impacts childcare as well. And one of the challenges is, I've heard from a lot of different businesses, well, we have to pay our people better to try to attract them so we can have enough servers to serve meals. And then they pass that back off to the consumers. And in childcare, parents can't pay more than what they're already paying. And so when they face a childcare worker shortage, they actually have to close rooms if they don't have enough workers. Wages are very low in childcare, and we're just not able to yet to compete with like positions in around the community. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we face that we're not going to find easy solutions to. Um, and we're finding that, I guess I probably should have started with the fact that we've got lots of new money coming in, and it seems like an enormous amount. So we saw in my organization alone that passed through to childcare providers nearly $1 million last year. In New York State budget and from the American Relief Act at the federal level that passes to the state, $2.4 billion has been designated for childcare. That's unheard of, unprecedented. And our biggest concern is that it will not help support the childcare going forward beyond the next 2 years when it exists. How are we going to look at this for the long run? Child care providers will be accessing that not through the Child Development Council in the second year of COVID, but through New York State systems. And if anybody has applied through the Grants Gateway or New York State system, it's not an easy process. So moving forward, and you can move it on. We're looking at we're doing a number of different things to try to address these concerns, all of them, but starting with this idea that childcare needs ongoing funding that's not parent dependent to support it. It needs a baseline, core, stable funding to support it. So we tried this out last year with an Adopt a Classroom program, an intergenerational campaign to save childcare. Community Foundation was one of our partners, as was the Cornell Academic and Professors Emeriti and the President's Council and Cornell Women and others, individuals who contributed to this. And we were able to provide 6 months of funding that was undesignated core support for childcare programs to support them during these ups and downs. And we focused primarily on the preschool classrooms. It was very successful for the time that it was available. And in 2021, now we have stabilization grants. And these are the grants that providers will apply to New York State for. They'll get between $3,000 and $18,000, depending upon a month for 6 months, depending upon their size. So our job at the Child Development Council will be providing them with help. How do you access that state system? How do you get onto Grants Gateway? How do you create the budget that shows your true cost of care? And how do you then keep the documentation and budgeting requirements in case you're audited, because these are federal funds? So that's happening, and that's very exciting, and we're looking forward to that. There will be continued support for expanded scholarships for essential workers, and again, that applies right through the state system. So I was just looking at Amy's note, distracted for a second. The kind of like little super secret about that is that childcare workers are essential workers. So when childcare workers got paid low wages and they were trying to pay for childcare, they often couldn't have their own kids in the programs where they were working because they couldn't afford regulated care, good quality care. So that was that's a really unfortunate situation, but this allows them to help pay for their childcare. So it helps increase their income. And the last thing that we're doing is we've contracted with Family and Children's Service as if we're the employer for all of the home-based providers out there. They're sort of micro enterprises, really owner-operated, small childcare programs. And we're funding them as a employee assistance program, an EAP project, which means that they will be able to access, we won't have any information on it, we don't need that, but using their license, they'll be able to access up to 6 counseling sessions per incident per year for themselves or their family members. And so this is just one small effort to try to help address some of the mental health challenges and some of the toxic stress that people are facing in their childcare program. So with that quick, fast overview from a lot of different areas, I really want to open it up and let people ask questions that are more specific that I can help to address.
Thank you, Sue. You always stay on top of this incredibly rapidly changing field. There are needs that show up and resources that come to fore, and we are so fortunate for your leadership and the leadership of the Child Development Council serving two counties, both Tompkins and Cortland counties. So thank you for that ongoing leadership and that information. A couple different ways you can engage in conversation here with a question for Sue. You can put it in the chat box. You can raise your hand. Amy Levere is going to be managing that process for us. So Sue, I'll start off by asking you, where do you see in the next 2 to 3 years real potential for improvement in the child care system that lasts beyond patchwork funding, emergency deployment of resources that are going to go away at some level? But where do you see the potential and opportunity there?
Well, I think that the patchwork funding, if as it's being used strategically for stabilization and for scholarships, if we can figure out how to really mobilize our communities across New York State, that's the only way that we're going to get that as an ongoing basis. And it
Mhm.
has to last beyond the 2 years that the ARP, the American Relief Act funding exists. So I think that, but there's a real potential there because we know that makes a difference. And if we can demonstrate, as we did here in Tompkins County, that we're not losing care, we're stabilizing the existing care.
Mhm.
That's one big step. And I think the next big step is really to capitalize on how we grow more childcare.
Mhm.
So we're in a childcare desert. Some of that 2.4 billion was to be used as to address childcare deserts. Tompkins won't get access to that. They're going to pick bigger places. But Tompkins was one of the big winners on the regional economic development grants. These are grants that are to help businesses grow and thrive in New
Mhm.
York State. And the Southern Tier funded 4 of them. So, what can we do to come together to get those 4 to actually come to fruition and get those buildings? Some are expansions and some are brand new buildings. Make it happen. I think there's an opportunity there. And those are the 2 that I think have real long lasting
Great.
benefits. Um,
Thank you.
those are, yeah.
Sue, there's another couple of questions that have come in and also questions that were submitted prior, but one that's just come in is what models for non-parent supported funding have you seen that show promise for our county long-term?
So long-term, really the child care subsidies at the low income level for families under 200% of poverty. There's been a national effort to raise that level of max who's eligible, because one of the things with childcare is we're seeing that middle class and moderate income families can't access it, just like low income families can't. They can't afford it. So we're trying to push that up. The other thing that's happening around New York State is to try to make the rules consistent around from county to county. That won't have a huge impact on Tompkins because we already do the max of what we can do. So we have to really force that level up. That's the only real source of ongoing long-term funding. And that we have to sort of start thinking about those underlying non-designated grants that can be used for personnel, for building and changes, upgrades, whatever it takes to just have that core funding. When you look at school district funding, they may not get enough, but as of the beds year, as of October 1, however many children are enrolled, then they get a baseline amount of funding. They know what they have to work with. With childcare, it's money in, money out, money in, money out, based upon how many parents you have at what income level. It's a really complex, way to finance it. And that's what we have to get beyond. We need to have some ongoing support.
Another question is what do you believe needs to happen to increase the quantity of in-home childcare providers in Tompkins County?
We've been operating a pilot program for a couple of years now to try to increase group family childcare, which is more stable than family. So it's a little bit bigger. There are 2 workers. It's slow. It's slow. We've had successes. We've learned a lot. We're doing much more around business support and helping them to be stable. We're seeing slow growth inward. So one of the things that we're doing is to try to encourage people who are going through the early childhood program at TC3 to know about home-based care. So far, our feeder has been from young people who work in childcare centers for a while and then realize maybe when they have their own children that they can start to open up their own home-based care. And so we just want to keep that knowledge base that that's an option out there and that it's a financially viable option as long as we put in some basic support systems. So it's really a bit about just ongoing communication with the community and the prospective providers.
Great to hear.
I will add one other thing is that we've
Yes.
started sort of this shared business model, like the EAP program and other kinds of things to try to help reduce their costs in some small way or provide them added services that don't mean added work. So we're trying to look at how many of those kinds of things can we put in place. That's so.
Can you also talk just a little bit about the progress of recruiting childcare providers of color? As we know, there have been some barriers to this in recent years.
I think, if you look nationally, it's a common field. They're just not paid the same, or they're not as high a level. There's not that career pathway that is provided for them. So I think that's something that we need to be able to look at. And how we recruit folks, I think, involves more integration into the community so people understand and know. So we have some champions, if you will, out there that are working within their communities, and then we work with the champions. So sometimes because you don't know who's on the ground thinking about it, you can find a way to connect with people. We've been offering more becoming a provider session, which is just let me see what this is all about. And that has helped also with people of color as well as white folks in the community who might be interested. It's difficult because, when we're recruiting people to become childcare providers, we're also saying out of the other side of our mouth, and the pay is really terrible. Why don't you want to do this? I mean, it's kind of like not really setting people up for a good career path. Home-based care actually pays a little bit better than working in a childcare center, but don't spread that around.
Good information. And speaking of information and people on this call, what would you suggest that individuals on this call can do to take action and within the networks also that they operate?
Well, we've been doing this, if we don't tell people, we don't tell our lawmakers what we need, parents, businesses, individuals, for a healthy community, if we don't tell them, they won't take action. The thing about young kids is everybody campaigns on it. It's a real popular topic to be campaigning on. But when it comes down to meeting that against some other priorities, there are many, many priorities out there. So who speaks the loudest? And the children aren't out there speaking the loudest. So we have to speak for them. And I think that we have to tell our legislators that we're voting with kids in mind, and we don't act that way, we won't vote for you. We really have to take action. I think that's probably the most important message we could send to our community as a whole.
Strong advocacy.
Sue, as we're beginning to wrap up, Child Development Council's collaborated with lots of other organizations. Can you just indicate some of those partners with whom that you've worked and where people might find a list of childcare services available?
So I'm going to start with the second first.
Sure.
So there's different kinds of care. So regulated childcare and legally exempt. That means you're small enough you don't have to be regulated, but you want to get paid through childcare subsidies. They can start with us. So you can do your own search online. You don't have to actually talk to a human, but if you have special circumstances, special needs, sometimes that works better. You can call us. I think on one of the slides we had the contact information, but it's info@childdevelopmentcouncil.org or www.childdevelopmentcouncil.org. So collaborations, yes, well, certainly there are many. And it's hard to, some of them, they come and go really quickly. Last year, we probably saw more collaborations than ever before in one year. And the kinds of collaborations were with our community foundation and other organizations. We also had a baby food and diaper drive-through, and so our collaborations were sort of unique. We had Food Distribution Network gave us boxes of food. The bicyclists downtown delivered it because people couldn't all come through a drive-through. The school districts who were delivering already to kids with school-age children, we were able to say, oh, and these families also have young children. Can you take the formula and diapers out to them? So there was, there's so many opportunities out there. I think one of the challenges that we have as an organization is keeping up with that in a way. But it's exciting and great to see happen.
Well, as we're wrapping up here, Sue, a number of folks have already indicated in the chat, and let me just add and express on behalf of the Community Foundation board and staff and donors that we want to really honor, celebrate, and salute years of work in a passionate, productive, positive, real difference that you have made in so many families, and celebrate and honor your longstanding record of achievement and work. And we're very happy you're going to be continuing to be in the community. But once you retire, you're going to take a little bit of time off and take a bit of a rest. So we thank you for being with us today at this Let's Talk, and honor your record of achievement and work and partnership in our community that has made so much difference for so many families in our community.
Thank you all so much. I'm really glad that it was this event that it's sort of my last event. It's my last public presentation. So I'm really happy to have been here with all of you. Thank you.
Can we all unmute and do some applause for Sue?
Woohoo!
Yay!
Thanks.
Yay!
Yay.
Thank you. And thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
Sue.
Thank you all for being with us today. Next Community Foundation Let's Talk is on September 28th. There'll be folks here from 211 talk about housing and 211 services. And here's the link to that in the chat. Again, these are all archived on our website. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your sunny summer day. Take care, be safe, get outside, breathe some fresh air, and enjoy some sunshine. Thank you all.
Thank you.